As for spa races go, I actually found this one pretty entertaining. The last couple weren't that great, and I can say we're really ending off on a good point going into the mid-season and the break. Yes, we had the exact same winner. Yes, it was a 20-second gap, but a lot of things to talk about, a lot of analysis to really make about it, and just to talk about how good Max Verstappen is. So the biggest talking points that I would say in this race, definitely by far, it's got to be Ferrari, Mercedes, and Aston Martin. The way that the teams performed. I mean, McLaren is also a good talking point, but I have a reason for as to why everything is kind of the way that it is and why Red Bull is so ahead. There is one reason and one reason alone that car is so much faster than everybody else, and it's got to be talked about. Let's get into it. I want to briefly mention the bottom marker teams. I know we expected Williams to actually be pretty fast here. Hey, on the softs, they were looking like a Red Bull. Hey, but put them on the mediums, they look like an AlphaTauri. So it was a different contrasted race to them. I guess what Alex was talking about with the tires overheating was probably doing the same thing on the mediums. They were probably overheating way too quickly and they were losing grip and sliding around too much, consisting of a bad race for Williams. Now, I think Albon actually had a very good race considering where the car was kind of placed at. I thought he could have gotten a 7 or an 8, and that would have been amazing for the Williams team. They really need to step it up, and that would have been a good jump up on Alfa Romeo, Haas, and other teams. But let's be honest, Alfa Romeo and Haas, AlphaTauri, I mean, they're lucky. Yuki had a great race, I can't lie. Yuki with a 10th position in a car that was definitely inferior to a lot of other cars on the grid. I gotta give him props. He raced amazingly. Good job for Yuki. Daniel really didn't have a chance to go anywhere. The car was stuck. They had him on a really weird strategy. That medium pit in the, he was on the mediums for 23 laps, and then he pit after 10 laps. It wasn't a good situation. Honestly, I don't know what AlphaTauri was doing, but hey, they did it right with Yuki, so there you go. A point for AlphaTauri, who is still stuck in last, though. But regardless, the pace of these three cars, and I'm talking Haas, Alfa Romeo, and AlphaTauri, they are so beyond everybody else's pace. Williams have their occasional race. They're actually kind of in the midfield now. They actually have some pace in some corners. In Poulan, they weren't that bad. They were not bad. I can't lie, the Williams car is improving. Now, every other car, it seems like it's regressing, especially that Haas car. I mean, the Haas car just might as well not be racing, the way that they are performing in this season. Nico has been outstanding. I think Kevin actually had a decent race here, but the car is just nowhere. It's nowhere on any track. You put it in Monaco, it's not good. You put it wherever. I mean, I'm Spa, Monaco, Monza, the car will be out of the top 10 every single race. I think they're not going to score a single point anymore, and it's not to do with the drivers, it's really the car. A lot of people are kind of on Kevin Magnussen for not having great races. I agree, he hasn't had some great races, but the car is nowhere. You can't expect these guys to pull miracles with a car that just slices like butter. So, that aside, the Alfa Romeo, I mean, I guess they've been looking okay. The pace in the car is still pretty behind, if you ask me. Nowhere really to be talked about in a good way. They still have a lot more to improve. And like I said, AlphaTauri, they're kind of just middle grounded. They seem to be doing a little bit better, but they're still not in a good position. As for the bigger teams, the ones that I really wanted to get into depth to, first I'm talking about Alpine real fast. Alpine actually wasn't bad in this race. I got to give it to them. They had a pretty decent race considering all. They actually were able to score points with Esteban, was scoring 4. And Pierre Gasly arguably should have gotten Yuki Tsunoda, but they had him on the worst strategy, and Esteban actually had a good strategy. So, good job to the team there. McLaren, Oscar, that dive was not there. I mean, I know he was blaming Carlos. Carlos did squeeze him into the wall, but that's not a dive that you'll ever really get some space for. And going 3 wide into turn 2, it's not really the best of situations for the team. So, unfortunately for them, the pace in the car was not great. I didn't expect Lando to really be in the top 5 anyways. I didn't expect Oscar to be there too, but that barn door. Here's the thing, McLaren is now in the stage that Aston Martin was in the beginning of the season. They are a downforce monster on tracks where they can actually use their downforce. They will be strong. They have better high speed. That's the only thing that Aston Martin didn't really have. They had a great medium to low speed, but high speed was kind of whatever. For them, high speed is fantastic. Their downforce is fantastic, but they are a slow car in a straight line, which has been consistent throughout every single Grand Prix we've been at as of recently. Aston Martin struggled with that at the beginning. Now they're in their kind of phase where they're like, okay, now we need less drag, but that results in less downforce. They aren't getting the right compromise. And what does this have to do? Why is Red Bull so ahead? It's the floor. They're just picking up and generating so much downforce in the bottom part of the car that the upper part of the car isn't as important as it is for these other teams. Aston Martin changed a couple of things in the upper part of the floor. Less drag, no downforce. It's because their floor is so, I would say it's doing such a minuscule effect in comparison to what Red Bull's is. On the straight, Max Verstappen was at 341, Lewis was at 307. So yet again, even with DRS, this should not be that big of a gap. And if it is, then hopefully Mercedes can get that same type of gap on Red Bull, but they cannot. With DRS, the car is nowhere to be found. Lewis had a very skinny rear wing going into here, and Lewis had an outstanding race. I mean, like, it was beautiful to watch how Lewis was racing. Lewis and Fernando, to me, were probably the top guys. Let me not disregard Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc actually had an amazing race, great on tire management. They even had to solve kind of like a fuel issue at the end there, so good job for Charles Leclerc. Sergio Perez, in the spot that he needed to be placed in, he's still 22 seconds behind his teammates, so I'm not going to say he's driver of the day, like most other people will. He had an okay race, so I got to give it to him. Hopefully he builds his confidence back up. I want to see a Sergio kind of like how I saw him in a Racing Point. It wasn't even Racing Point, it was Force India when he was versing Esteban Ocon, to where I really loved seeing how Sergio Perez was. All fierce, putting Ocon into the wall if he needed to, fighting for those positions. Here, he can go by Max. Not a fan of that, but I mean, all in all, he didn't have the pace, so I get it. But at least this could build some confidence for Sergio Perez. Lance Stroll, I don't think he had a good race. Complained about straight line speed. The car had a lot of straight line speed. It's how Fernando was actually catching cars and why the strategy worked. Lance was on a really bad strategy though. I don't know why they put him on a one stop, which was a medium to soft. That wasn't a good call in my opinion. Same with George Russell. I think George had a lot more pace in the car. I don't think he could have caught Fernando. I think Fernando actually had a great race and they were almost on par, Lewis, Charles, and Fernando. I just think Fernando wasn't pushing as much. The car was probably maybe a tenth or two behind on every single lap, so that's why you see the bigger difference. But Fernando wasn't slow. The car actually looked good here, considering they went for that really low downforce setup. It was the right call to make. Everybody was calling them out before it. They made the right call. Qualifying was always going to be a gap. But hey, they passed McLaren, and McLaren was way ahead in qualifying. So it comes to show the car is still there when it needs to be. Aston Martin can be proud of themselves in this weekend with really less drag on the car. This is good, but they need to find a way to make that floor a lot more reliant. And they talked about bringing a huge upgrade to Zandvoort, which is going to be the floor, side pods, and working on the engine cover, getting that all into sync. Hopefully a little bit more of an undercut, learning how to really suction that floor into its undercut. That is important for the team to learn right now. As for Mercedes, step up, step up, step up. This is huge. I think Zandvoort is actually going to be a very strong track for them. I actually think that Red Bull is going to have a tough matchup in Zandvoort. It was here where I expected them to actually, I thought Max was going to be ahead by 40 seconds. This is a good sign that he was only ahead by 22. But then you look at Charles Leclerc at 32 seconds, and you look at Lewis Hamilton 49, you see Fernando 56. So he was very far ahead on a huge lap. But yet again, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So this is okay. Max Verstappen is just outstanding though. The way he just conserves his tires, the amount of pace this guy gets out of the car. He was a second faster than Perez on the last stint. Like, Perez is no slouch. Like, that's what people keep forgetting. This guy isn't some Mazepin or something. He's Sergio Perez. He's a great driver, but he just makes him look like... He just makes him look average. That's the thing. Verstappen makes people look average or below average. And that's what he's doing to Perez. It's going to be hard to find confidence when you're putting the car on the edge and just getting everything out of it. And plus, look what he did in the sprint. Look what Perez did in the sprint. I know he got hit, but even before the hit, it was not a good sprint for Perez. All in all, the cars from second to fifth are very close, but Red Bull is still miles ahead, and it's got to do with that floor, man. That floor is just a different concept, everybody. I'm going to make a whole entire video really talking about everybody's floor, really the top 5 teams, and really going into depth as to why they are so much further ahead. There is a reason for this, and Red Bull have just nailed it. They have just nailed the competition, honestly, and I do not expect them to lose a race. Maybe it'll get close in some races. Zandvoort could be a closer one, but it'll be tough to decide if they will actually lose a race on race pace merit alone. Let me know your thoughts down below. What do you guys actually think of the Belgian Grand Prix? I thought it was actually a very fun race to watch. I think the overtaking, the strategy, the really 3 stops and 2 stops made this a fun race. This is why Pirelli and Formula One need to look into bringing more stops into races and really focusing more on strategy and pit stops and how the cars go. So many overtakes. There were some beautiful overtakes from Ocon and Pierre Gasly. Multiple other cars. Fernando had a couple of beautiful ones. It was a great race to watch. Very enjoyable from a Formula One fan perspective. So let me know your thoughts down below. Please leave a comment. I'm going to try and reply as I always do. Leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world. And peace.